Picture this: Britain, winter 1974. Streets go dark before sunset. Factories fall silent. Elevators stop mid-floor. This isn't a storm. It isn't a war. It was ordered. During the 3-day week of 1974, power cuts spread across the UK as the energy crisis and miners' strike pushed Britain to the edge. The country wasn't failing. It was being deliberately slowed down. By law. Factories shut down mid-shift. Steel hardened inside half-built frames. Assembly lines stopped with parts still hanging in place. Lights flickered without warning. Phones died mid-call. Typewriters froze between letters. Workers stood waiting for power that did not return. Supervisors counted minutes instead of output. Freight trains stalled on darkened tracks. Loading docks emptied by afternoon. Night shifts were erased from the calendar. When electricity returned, machines roared for a few frantic hours. Then everything went silent again. 3 days of work, 4 days of waiting. Across Britain in 1974, movement was no longer continuous. It came in bursts, then it stopped. Streetlights cut out in entire districts. Traffic signals blinked once, then went dead. Cars stalled in frozen intersections. Shops locked their doors before dusk. Freezers warmed. Shelves emptied faster than they could be restocked. Hospitals switched to backup generators. Corridors dimmed. Non-essential wards closed without argument. In homes, kettles stopped mid-boil. Radios faded into static. Rooms fell cold long before midnight. People watched the clock more than the news. They memorized the hours when light would return. When power surged back, washing machines spun all at once. Factories rushed. Cities strained. Then, the grid tightened again. Darkness rolled forward block by block. Not chaos, control. 3 days alive with noise. 4 days held in suspension. Britain did not stop all at once. It stopped in measured doses. Cabinet meetings stretched late into dim rooms. Maps of the grid lay open on long tables. Regions were marked, crossed out, reassigned. Power was redirected like rationed water. One city lit, another darkened. Factories called for exemptions. Hospitals demanded priority. Transport systems waited for clearance. Coal deliveries slowed to a crawl. Pickets stood at frozen gates. Trucks idled with nothing to unload. Announcements repeated across radio frequencies. Schedules revised. Promises shortened. Police guarded power stations through the night. Engineers monitored failing lines. Switches were flipped by hand. No sirens. No explosions. Just reduction. Output cut. Hours cut. Movement cut. The country narrowed itself to survive the week. 3 days permitted, 4 days withheld, and the countdown to the next shutdown began again. By the second week, the timetable stopped feeling temporary. People stopped asking when power would return. They asked what would be cut next. Shops reduced hours again. Factories postponed contracts. Deliveries were cancelled without rescheduling. Pay packets shrank. Overtime disappeared. Shifts were reassigned to darkness. In homes, routines collapsed into fragments. Cooking was timed to electricity. Laundry waited for permitted hours. Schools adjusted schedules around supply. Public transport thinned after sunset. Streets emptied earlier each night. The noise of a working country became intermittent. Bursts of motion. Long pauses. Then silence. Conversations changed. Not about weather, not about inconvenience. About endurance. 3 days active. 4 days suspended. And no guarantee the balance would hold. Rumors moved faster than electricity. Lines formed before sunrise. Fuel stations posted limits. Suppliers warned of further cuts. Factories argued over priority. Hospitals requested guarantees. Transport schedules thinned again. Newspapers printed darker headlines each morning. Broadcasters repeated revised timetables. No one promised stability. Generators coughed in basements. Engineers worked through dim corridors. Switchboards clicked without pause. One district restored, another removed. Entire neighborhoods waited in coats. Windows glowed in scattered rows, then vanished. The grid tightened further. 3 days allowed, 4 days withheld. The margin grew thinner, and for the first time, the question was no longer about schedules. It was about control. By the third week, the pattern began to crack. Power returned late, then not at all. Factories waited through scheduled hours that never came. Supervisors sent workers home before noon. Freight stood idle for days. Cold warehouses filled with unsent goods. Contracts stalled mid-delivery. In control rooms, warning lights multiplied. Load forecasts slipped. Reserve margins thinned. One surge tripped an entire district. Another cut a rail line without notice. Darkness no longer followed the timetable. It arrived early. It lingered. Hospitals delayed procedures. Public offices closed without dates. The grid strained under simultaneous demand. When electricity returned, it came unevenly, flickering, unstable. For hours at a time, the country held its breath. 3 days were no longer guaranteed. 4 days stretched without certainty. And the pause between shutdowns grew shorter. Crowds gathered outside closed plants. Pickets stood in freezing wind. Police lines formed before sunrise. Arguments moved from meeting rooms to streets. Shouts replaced briefings. Promises shortened. Parliament sessions stretched past midnight. Voices rose. Votes delayed. Headlines hardened. Confidence slipped. Markets hesitated. In working districts, frustration thickened. In business offices, contracts froze. In homes, patience thinned. Rumors of wider shutdowns spread faster than announcements. Speculation replaced certainty. Each restored district triggered another blackout elsewhere. No one trusted the schedule. 3 days felt smaller. 4 days felt longer. The balance held, but barely. And for the first time, the possibility of a complete stop no longer sounded extreme. When the restrictions finally eased, nothing resumed at full speed. Factories restarted cautiously. Orders were renegotiated. Shifts rebuilt from fragments. Streetlights stayed on longer, but cities did not feel steady. Businesses counted losses in silence. Workers calculated missed wages. Schedules were rewritten with new caution. The 3-day week ended. The memory did not. Managers kept contingency plans on their desks. Engineers reviewed reserve margins again and again. Officials spoke more carefully about supply. Movement returned, but confidence did not. In 1974, Britain learned how quickly continuity could narrow. Not with explosions, not with invasion, with switches. 3 days active, 4 days withheld. A modern country had operated on limits and survived. But it never forgot how close the margin had been.